Linda barely remembered her father. He died when she was 5. Since then, she and her mother had lived alone in a small but neat and very cozy house that Linda's father had once built. Linda's mother, Paloma, took a long time to recover from the loss. She didn't want to start a new relationship, and although she was a very beautiful and attractive young woman, she didn't let any man get close. However, men still courted her, gave her flowers and gifts, which she accepted with condescension, but honestly told each suitor that he could only be her friend. Linda liked living alone with her mother. They never quarreled, and Paloma always supported her daughter, who in turn was happy to help around the house. They cooked together, shopped together, and cleaned together. On weekends, mother and daughter would go to an amusement park or to a lake outside the city. Life with her mother seemed ideal and wonderful to Linda. But time passed, and one day, when Linda was 12, her mother had a new suitor. He was a little older than Paloma, rich and handsome. Diego gave Linda's mother luxurious bouquets and expensive jewelry, and the girl noticed that after meeting with him, the young woman blossomed. "Mom, are you in love?" Linda asked once, and Paloma blushed. Linda just shook her head. But after a few months, one morning at breakfast, her mother told the girl that soon Diego would come to visit them. "He wants to meet you," Paloma explained, spreading butter on toast. "And he won't come alone, his son will come with him. He's 3 years older than you. The boy's name is Emiliano. I think you'll be friends." Having said this, Linda's mother smiled encouragingly. "But why should I be friends with him?" Linda didn't understand. "I already have a lot of friends at school. And I don't really talk to boys." Mom put the toast on the plate, set the butter knife aside, and, after hesitating a little, replied, "Maybe soon we will all live together." Linda couldn't believe what she heard. "What? You want to marry this Diego?" Paloma nodded in response. "It seems we really love each other. He is very caring. I feel good with him," the young woman admitted. "But Mom, I thought you liked living like this, just the two of us. We're so calm and comfortable together." Paloma got up from her seat and, approaching her daughter, hugged her shoulders. "Of course. I love you very much, and there is no greater happiness for me than spending time with you. But I'm a young woman and I'm tired of loneliness. I want to love and be loved." "And what about Dad?" Linda asked with tears in her eyes. "Will you just erase him from your life?" Paloma shuddered. "Oh no, sweetheart. I will never forget him. He will always remain in my heart." A tear rolled down the young woman's cheek. She still remembered and loved her late husband. "And in mine," Linda whispered softly. "I will always remember your father," Paloma added, sighing. "But life goes on. And I know he would want me to be happy. Maybe I can give you a little sister or brother." Linda wiped away her tears and nodded. "Okay, Mom. If this Diego makes you happier, I will be very grateful to him." Paloma smiled. "I'm so glad you understand me." "Thank you for that, darling." Linda took a crispy toast from the plate and took a bite, washing it down with warm milk. "When are they coming to visit?" she asked. "Friday evening," Paloma replied. "We need to prepare a gorgeous dinner," her daughter said. And they began to discuss the menu excitedly. On Friday evening, the doorbell rang. Paloma, in a beautiful red dress with puffed sleeves and a full skirt, went to open the door. Diego and Emiliano were standing on the threshold. Both were dressed in suits, and both were holding flowers. A lush bouquet of red roses was for Paloma, and a cloud of daisies, beautifully wrapped in delicate pink rustling paper, was for Linda. The gentleman entered the house and looked around. "It's very cozy here," Diego noted. He looked at Paloma with loving eyes. "Thank you," the young woman smiled and exclaimed, "Linda, come here. Diego and Emiliano want to meet you." Linda, in an elegant blue dress, came out of the kitchen. She had managed to take off her apron and was now nervously adjusting her hair, which Paloma had curled with a curling iron. Linda was very anxious. She was afraid that she might not like Diego and his son, but even more that Diego and his son might not like her. The man smiled broadly at the girl, but Emiliano stood with a stony face. Handing her the bouquet, he didn't look at Linda. The girl took the daisies and hurried back to the kitchen. She put the flowers in water but felt no joy. Linda realized that the father had forced his son to give her the bouquet. Sighing, she took a large platter with beautifully sliced fruits and carried it to the living room. On the way, Linda admired her own work. From childhood, the girl liked to decorate everything she could get her hands on, and it gave her great pleasure. By the way, other people were delighted when they saw Linda's creations. They unanimously said that the girl had talent and should develop it. Linda painted pictures, sculpted from clay, made collages from colored paper, in short, engaged in all kinds of creativity. She also always dressed unusually and interestingly, although she didn't have any special designer clothes like some of her classmates. Linda just skillfully combined colors and textures, and also used a creative approach to choosing accessories. In addition, the girl could make herself a bracelet from beautiful beads or sew an extravagant bag from fabric scraps on her mother's old sewing machine, which was stored in her grandmother's chest. Grandmother was no longer alive, but Paloma often told Linda that she was a professional and very gifted seamstress. "Perhaps you inherited her love for creativity," Mom often said. Linda loved looking at old black and white photos of her grandmother and her vintage outfits. "Someday I'll sew a dress like that for myself," Linda dreamed out loud, and Mom agreed with her. "It would suit you," she nodded. "And you'll manage, I'm sure of it." Setting a fruit platter on the table, Linda lovingly looked at it and the other treats. The table looked festive, as if decorated by professional culinary designers. Mom and Diego came over, and he commented admiringly, "Wow, what beauty! You are true masters." Paloma looked at Linda and smiled. "It's all my daughter's doing. She has a talent for decor. She can decorate anything as if done by professionals. You should see her room. It feels like it was designed by top designers." Diego nodded in agreement. "Seeing this table, I have no doubts about this young lady's skills." Linda felt proud hearing Diego's words. There was sincerity, confidence, and calmness in him, and with each minute, Mom's admirer was winning her over more and more. The same could not be said for Emiliano, who sat on the couch with his smartphone and didn't even glance at the dishes Linda had so carefully decorated. It seemed like the boy didn't care at all that she and Mom had worked hard to impress the guests. His indifference irritated Linda. Even if you're not a fan of cooking, you could at least be polite and friendly. Paloma brought jugs of juice from the kitchen and invited everyone to the table. Linda noticed Emiliano reluctantly put his smartphone away as if torn away from some urgent business. Paloma sat across from Diego, and Linda had to look at the curly top of his son's head. Emiliano stared at his plate and didn't look at anyone. Paloma cast worried glances at the boy, concerned if he liked everything, but Diego, noticing this, took her hand. "Don't worry, dear, Emiliano is always this reserved." Hearing his name, the boy flinched and looked at his father. "I just have nothing to add to your idol," he remarked gloomily and stared at his plate again. Linda noticed he was poking at the pasta her mom had so passionately prepared as if it were hazardous nuclear waste. What a snob, Linda thought irritably. Do I really have to live with him under the same roof and watch him show off every day? Diego and Mom talked about the upcoming wedding and the trip they planned to take afterward. Of course, Emiliano and Linda were supposed to go with them. Unfortunately, neither had grandparents to watch over them, and uncles and aunts lived too far away. Linda heard Diego mention a luxurious hotel with a pool where they would stay. Wow, cool, thought the girl. She had never stayed in a hotel, let alone one with a pool. Linda imagined how wonderful it would be to embark on her first ever journey, but then felt a kick under the table. It didn't hurt her, but rather made her uncomfortable. She stared intently at Emiliano, but he didn't apologize. He didn't even look at her, as if she didn't exist at all. He did it on purpose. Linda concluded, feeling tears of hurt welling up in her eyes. If it had been accidental, surely he would have apologized. Linda tried to pretend everything was fine, swallowing her tears, but her mood was ruined. Not even the delicious raspberry cake she and her mom had baked the previous evening and generously frosted could help her forget Emiliano's unpleasant act. She noticed Emiliano break off a piece of the cake, put it in his mouth, and chew. Linda expected him to smile, but he suddenly grimaced and pushed the plate of cake aside. Linda bit her lip. Shortly after that, Diego thanked both hostesses for their hospitality and said it was time to leave. True to his word, before departing, he helped Paloma and Linda clear the table, which Linda found very endearing. Overall, she was charmed by her mom's new fiancé but extremely disappointed in his son. A month later, Paloma and Diego got married. Immediately after the celebration, they and the children grabbed their already packed suitcases and got into the man's large black Jeep for their honeymoon. Linda and Emiliano sat in the back, both displeased with their proximity. Emiliano kept staring at his phone screen, while Linda couldn't tear her gaze away from the window. Suddenly, she felt something tickle her leg, and when she looked down, she screamed piercingly. The car swerved. Caught off guard, Diego momentarily let go of the steering wheel. "What happened?" exclaimed Paloma, turning to her daughter, her eyes filled with concern. "There was a spider," Linda barely managed to say, covering her mouth with her hands. "A spider?" Paloma was surprised. Emiliano quickly leaned down and grabbed something in his fist. "You're not suggesting that there are spiders in Dad's car, are you?" he asked sarcastically. Linda shot him a furious look. She was sure he had put the spider there. "Show me what's in your hand," she demanded, but Emiliano didn't seem to hear her. He was back to staring at his phone. "Show me," Linda persisted. Emiliano quickly put his hand in his pocket, then pulled it out and showed her his empty palm. "Satisfied?" he asked coldly. "Now it's in your pocket." Linda wasn't backing down. "I hope you don't plan to frisk me like a cop," the boy remarked icily. Linda felt herself blush, almost steaming with anger. She forced herself to stay silent. With that, the incident was over, and silence returned to the car. They arrived at the hotel late in the evening and were immediately shown to a large 3-room suite. The largest room went to Paloma and Diego, the smaller room to Emiliano, and the smallest, but no less cozy, to Linda. The girl was so tired she didn't even unpack. She locked her room, fearing Emiliano might sneak in at night and throw another spider into her bed. Luckily for Linda, the night passed without incident. Once she thought she heard scratching at her door, but it might have been a dream. The next day, right after breakfast, Linda and Paloma changed into their swimsuits and headed to the pool. The girl loved splashing in the warm water, diving, and sliding down the slides. Later, Diego and Emiliano joined them. Linda tried to keep her distance from her newly minted brother, but he seemed to follow her on purpose. Several times, he managed to push her off the slide, and although it didn't hurt Linda, she couldn't shake off the feeling of annoyance. "What did I ever do to him?" she thought over and over again. In the evening, when Diego and Emiliano went to the shooting range that the boy was eager to visit, Linda complained to her mother about him. "Sweetheart, I think you're exaggerating," her mother said gently. "Emiliano seems like a calm and balanced boy. Yes, he is almost always silent, but he doesn't hold any grudge against you." "Then why did he push me into the water several times?" Linda asked, almost crying. "I'm just lucky that I swim well. Another girl in my place could have gulped water from the shock." Her mother stroked her hair and hugged her. "All right, dear. If you want, I'll talk to Diego about it. He'll handle it." Linda rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "Thanks, Mom. I hope that boy finally leaves me alone." Her mother shook her head reproachfully. "He's not just some boy. He's your brother now. You need to try to get along with him." Linda looked skeptically at her mother. "What are you talking about? He's always on his phone." Paloma sighed. "Yes, you're right. I think it's all because of his adolescence. He's 15, and Linda rolled her eyes. And how long will this adolescence last? Mom, please don't make excuses for him. He's just rude and ill-mannered. He's nothing like Diego. I know, her mother nodded, adjusting Linda's bangs. It's just that Diego is always busy with work. He has no time to pay attention to his son. We must be lenient. Linda said nothing. Deep down, she disagreed with her mother. She thought that what Emiliano deserved was not leniency, but a good spanking. As promised, Paloma talked to Diego, and he cautiously spoke with his son. Unfortunately, their conversation didn't change anything. Emiliano was stubborn and refused to listen to his father. Of course, he didn't openly bully Linda, but she felt that the Cold War between them continued. This went on throughout the honeymoon, and nothing changed in the new house where Paloma and Linda moved after the trip. The house pleased the girl. It was a spacious and bright mansion with expensive furniture and paintings in gilded frames on the walls. However, at first, everything seemed unfamiliar to Linda. She loved their small house on the outskirts of the city. Now they lived in the center, and Linda had to go to school by car. Paloma offered to transfer her to the new school where Emiliano studied, but the girl didn't want to leave her teachers and close friends. That's not a problem, I'll hire a driver, Diego said, and Paloma looked at him gratefully. Linda's new room was also large and bright, but not as cozy as the one in the old house. So the girl gradually began to decorate it to her taste. Thankfully, they had no money problems. Her mother was happy to encourage Linda's desire to decorate her bedroom independently, and Diego didn't mind either. In the end, Linda came to terms with the new order of things, and she even began to like living in the huge mansion. However, Emiliano still caused her a lot of trouble, and this was the only thing that spoiled the girl's life. The boy took Linda's things without asking, secretly added salt to her drinks, and did other small mean things he never admitted to, insisting he had nothing to do with it. She's lying about everything, he said about Linda, and she almost cried from resentment. The only thing that comforted her was that they studied at different schools, and for most of the day she didn't see the boy and almost forgot about Emiliano. Linda only remembered him in the evening when the whole family gathered at home. Sometimes Diego suggested they all play board games, and it would have been fun if Emiliano didn't do everything possible to make Linda lose. One day even Diego noticed this. He was outraged, to which Emiliano calmly replied that he had nothing to do with it. It's her own fault that she's not smart enough to win. Paloma raised her eyebrows indignantly when she heard this, but Diego didn't let her say a word. Apologize to your sister right now for your words, he said sternly to Emiliano. I've tolerated this for too long. Hearing this, the boy silently stood up and, demonstratively throwing the playing cards on the table, went to his room, slamming the door loudly. Since then, the icy wall between the boy and the girl grew even thicker. Both diligently pretended the other didn't exist. Linda continued her favorite hobbies and one day, to her surprise, noticed that Emiliano also drew. However, he liked digital art. He drew on a special graphic tablet that his father had given him. Gradually, the tablet completely replaced the smartphone, and now Emiliano was always engrossed in his drawings. One day, Linda managed to glance over his shoulder. She saw a gloomy picture of a dark city with a flock of crows swirling above it. Despite its grimness, the drawing was very beautiful, and Linda couldn't help but admire the imagination and skill of its creator. 3 years passed, and Emiliano finally left home. He enrolled in the university's design faculty. Of course, Diego's connections helped him a lot. Thanks to them, the young man even received a scholarship. He hadn't yet decided on a specific direction, but the first 2 years were general, so he still had time to think. Emiliano plunged into student life and rarely visited home to see his father, which Linda was even glad about. Without her brother, life in the large mansion with her mother and Diego became a true paradise. However, the girl was somewhat envious of the young man. She also desperately wanted to enroll in the same faculty to become a professional designer. Unlike Emiliano, Linda had firmly decided that she wanted to work on interiors. She studied diligently and spent almost all her time with textbooks, while Paloma found design courses and enrolled Linda in them. The girl loved the teachers, and she was inspired to create her first tentative projects in her sketchbooks. Paloma supported her daughter in every way, and Diego promised to help with her admission. There was only a year left, and Linda's future looked bright. However, her plans and dreams were not destined to come true because a terrible tragedy occurred one day. That evening, Diego and Paloma were returning home from a short trip. The man was driving, and his wife was in the passenger seat. It was raining heavily, and the windshield wipers were barely coping with the downpour. At one of the intersections, their car skidded, and a truck crashed into it. Diego and Paloma died instantly. When Linda learned about this, she felt sick and fainted. The girl didn't remember how she regained consciousness or who was around her. It seemed her mother's best friend was taking care of her. Everything felt like a dream. The funeral, where she saw Emiliano briefly, he had grown up a lot and was very pale. The young man didn't even approach her. Then Linda was told that the large mansion was inherited by Emiliano, and she needed to move to their old house where she and her mother lived before her marriage. Everything was like a blur again. The girl packed her things and left the room without looking back, a room she had put so much of her soul into decorating. She took almost nothing with her, only clothes, shoes, books, and sketchbooks with beautiful interior designs. In the old house, she went to her old room, collapsed on the bed, and cried for a long time until she fell asleep. Thus began her new lonely life. Linda understood that now she couldn't even think about university admission. She needed to find a job to feed herself and pay for the house. She considered herself lucky not to have to live on the street. Having her own home greatly boosted her confidence. However, in the evenings, Linda felt very lonely and had trouble falling asleep. She cried into her pillow for half the night and went to the cafe where she worked as a waitress in the morning. Of course, it was very hard for her, and she often mixed up orders. Finally, the cafe administrator couldn't stand it and fired her. The girl had no choice but to look for a new job. While browsing job ads, she involuntarily paused on those requiring designers. Linda sighed heavily, knowing that without a degree and experience, she wouldn't be hired anywhere. One day, she saw that a company specializing in interior design was looking for a cleaner and decided to apply. When the girl came for an interview, she was met by a pleasant young administrator who escorted her to the boss, a man of about 45 with dark hair streaked with gray and cheerful green eyes. Linda liked him at first sight. It seemed to her that Senor Sanchez resembled her father in some way. Of course, she barely remembered her dad, but her memory helpfully filled in the forgotten details. Senor Sanchez hired the girl, and since then, her life became a little better. Linda came in early to watch how the professionals worked. When everyone left for the day, she reverently looked at the unfinished projects left on the tables and imagined how she would complete them. Besides, after finishing her cleaning, Linda took a design book from the shelf and studied it for a long time. Sometimes she looked at the clock and realized it was already late at night. Then the girl would return the book to the shelf and walk home. Fortunately, the company's office was not far from her house. A year passed this way. One day, Linda decided to come to work early and, upon entering the office, heard voices in the boss's office. The girl had just started watering the plants when the door opened and Emiliano stepped out of the office. Linda was stunned. The young man glanced at her, and she saw that he recognized her. "What are you doing here?" she asked without greeting. "I'm doing an internship here," Emiliano replied coldly, which didn't surprise Linda at all. The icy wall between them remained. After Emiliano left, the girl wearily sank into a chair and cried. She didn't want to remember the past, but it had burst back into her life. Since then, Linda saw Emiliano almost every day at one of the designer's desks. He always stayed late because he struggled to integrate into the company's projects. He lacked the experience to work as quickly and efficiently as the others. Linda and Emiliano never spoke, as if they didn't notice each other. The girl was even content with this. She didn't want to pretend that she enjoyed talking to him. Both knew they would never find common ground. Time passed, and Linda heard that Emiliano had defended his diploma and was hired full-time. To celebrate, the young man threw a party at the office, after which Linda cleaned up for a long time. The girl still stayed late after work to read design books and even started drawing her projects in sketchbooks again. She held on to the hope that one day she could come here not as a cleaner but as a new designer. Linda began saving money little by little to enroll in training courses again. A few months later, the boss announced that the company would participate in a tender with a major client, and each designer needed to prepare a project. At a general meeting, the best one would be chosen to present at the bidding. Work in the office intensified, and when Linda came in the evenings, most designers were still at their desks, working on their projects. Emiliano was among them. Linda saw that he was struggling because there was always a pile of crumpled papers and torn sheets around his desk. The girl was tired of picking them up. There was one day left before the meeting. Linda came to the office once again to clean. That evening, only Emiliano was there. He was bent over his desk, drawing something on a large sheet of paper. His expression was tense, and Linda tried not to make any noise to avoid attracting his attention. The last thing she wanted was to talk to him. When the girl finished cleaning, she decided to do some studying. Sitting at a desk away from Emiliano, she opened a design book and began sketching in her notebook. Occasionally, she would lift her head to glance at the young man. She was surprised that he still hadn't left. Apparently, he had decided to finish his project no matter what. "Why aren't you going home?" Emiliano asked suddenly. His voice had an irritated edge, as if Linda's mere presence was making him nervous. "Working on projects too," Linda replied curtly. She didn't know why she told the truth. Perhaps she wanted to prove to the guy that she could do more than just clean. About 10 minutes passed when Linda suddenly heard the phone ringing in the manager's office. She was very surprised. Who needed the office at such a late hour? Linda got up from the desk to answer it. But when she entered Mr. Sanchez's office and picked up the receiver, there was only silence on the other end. The girl shrugged in surprise. Probably someone just dialed the wrong number. As she was closing the door, she heard the rustling of paper and hurried footsteps. Had Emiliano finally decided to go home? Walking down the small corridor, she returned to the room where the designers' desks were and saw that the young man was still sitting in his place. Suddenly, Linda felt very tired and decided to go home. She put the design book back on the shelf, closed her notebook, and put it in her bag. Glancing at Emiliano, who paid her no attention, she walked to the exit. She returned home late at night, took a shower, and immediately went to bed. The next morning, the boss called and asked Linda to come to the office early. "Today we have a short day. After the meeting, I will send all the designers home. They have been overworking themselves preparing for the tender." Linda said she would come at exactly 2 and hung up. She was very curious to find out whose project the boss would choose. After breakfast, Linda drew for a while, then took a walk, and finally headed to work. When the girl entered the office, she saw through the glass wall of the small conference room that the meeting was coming to an end. Emiliano was standing next to the boss, who was shaking his hand. Linda froze at the sight. Could Emiliano's project have been the best? This simply couldn't be. Linda had seen him struggle, and when she once picked up a crumpled sheet, she realized that interior design was hard for Emiliano. He should have become an artist or a 3D graphic designer, perhaps creating drawings for video games or illustrations for dark fantasy. Interior design definitely wasn't his forte. How did it happen that Emiliano won? And then Linda saw something that made her clutch her heart. One of her projects suddenly appeared on the screen. But how was this possible? Emiliano's project is undoubtedly an innovative solution and a completely fresh perspective on interior design. Just look at his concept. "I have never seen anything like it," she heard the boss's praise. It took Linda a moment to understand the meaning of his words. Her project was that good? But then why was Emiliano standing before the assembly and not her? How did the project end up with him? And then Linda figured it all out. She remembered the mysterious phone call to the manager's office, the rustling paper, and the hurried footsteps. Emiliano had sneaked up to her desk and looked at her sketches in her notebook. Then he stole one of them. Linda quickly opened her bag and took out the notebook she always carried with her. Sure enough, one page was missing. The girl felt a wave of fury and hatred toward Emiliano. Without thinking about the consequences, she shoved the notebook back into her bag and, throwing it on the table, burst into the conference room. The boss raised his eyebrows in surprise at the sight of the cleaner. "Do you need something? We're not finished yet. Please wait, we need another 10 minutes. Then you can start cleaning." "I'm not here to clean," Linda exclaimed. "I want to report a theft." "What?" the boss exclaimed. "What theft? Did something go missing?" Linda's eyes flashed with fury as she threw a furious glance at Emiliano. "My project is missing." There were astonished whispers and chuckles in the room. "The project of a clean floor," someone joked. Linda looked around in confusion but tried to pull herself together. Of course, everyone saw her as just a cleaner. No one suspected that she secretly studied design and came up with ideas. "I created this project," Linda said loudly and confidently. Emiliano turned pale. "That's not true," he blurted out. "Since when do cleaners work on projects?" "She's lying." The boss stared intently at Linda, and his eyes clearly showed irritation. "I don't understand what's going on here," he exclaimed, his voice suddenly breaking into a shout. "Why are you making this scene, miss? You've worked for us for many years, and everything was fine. But now you've crossed the line. I'm forced to fire you." Linda blushed. Mr. Sanchez had never yelled at her before. "I'll prove that this is my project," she replied in a trembling voice. She ran out of the room and brought her bag. Taking out her sketches, she handed them to the boss. He took the notebook and opened it. Seeing Linda's projects, he gasped, and his face stretched in amazement. "Are these really your works?" he asked quietly, looking up at the girl. Linda just nodded in response. She noticed the grimace that twisted Emiliano's handsome face and smiled triumphantly. Meanwhile, the boss continued to flip through the notebook. "But this can't be. This is amazing. You have a natural talent. And you're wasting your time cleaning?" The others stretched their necks and squirmed in their chairs, eager to catch a glimpse of the unique projects the boss was praising so highly. Finally, he closed the notebook and looked at Emiliano. "I see that the young lady is right. Someone here hasn't been very honest." Emiliano lowered his head. "You're fired," the boss said succinctly. The young man nodded dejectedly and left the room. Linda saw him heading to his desk, presumably to gather his things. "And you, miss, I would like to ask to stay," the boss said, addressing Linda. "Everyone else is dismissed." The designers stood up and headed for the exit. As they passed by Linda, they tried to get a better look at her. Some were doing so for the first time, as if they had never noticed her before. So strange, the girl thought. I've worked with them for many years, but I was always invisible to them. Only now do I seem to have gained color and form. When everyone had left, the boss pointed Linda to one of the chairs and sat down next to her. "Your works have truly impressed me. They have freshness, taste, and deep meaning. I would like to hire you as a designer. But as you've already understood, sir, I don't have a diploma. I'm self-taught," Linda admitted. The boss nodded. "Yes, I know that, but I am still willing to take you on. I see that you have many skills, and what you lack can be learned. I'll ask others to help you if you have any questions. Moreover, our company has the opportunity to send you to designer courses right after the tender. We will pay for your training ourselves." Linda couldn't believe what she heard. Could she really be this lucky? Had her dream come true all at once? She smiled and sincerely thanked Senor Sanchez. Linda felt that a new, much-desired world had opened up to her. However, something made her look up at Emiliano, who was packing his things with a slight hunch. Linda didn't even realize that she felt sorry for him. Apologizing to the boss, she left the room and approached the young man. She wanted to say something, but her tongue wouldn't obey. Linda didn't think Emiliano regretted his actions, but she still wanted to support him. After all, once upon a time, they were one family. But what happened next amazed Linda to the core. Sorry it turned out this way, she heard the young man's quiet voice. Did he just apologize to her? Linda couldn't believe her ears. I acted terribly, Emiliano said. I don't know what came over me. The project just wouldn't turn out the way I envisioned it. And when I saw your drawings, I lost my head. They had exactly what I was trying to recreate on countless sheets of paper. That lightness, airiness, openness. I could never keep up with you. With these words, Emiliano sighed heavily. You don't need to keep up with anyone. Linda exclaimed, surprising herself. You are you. You just need to be yourself, that's all. Emiliano looked at the girl in surprise. But who am I? He asked bitterly, looking at his hands. You can become a great illustrator, Linda said. I once saw your drawing. It would look great on the pages of some dark Gothic story. Emiliano looked at Linda, not believing what he was hearing. Are you serious? He asked doubtfully. Of course, the girl nodded. I'm sure you're capable of a lot. You just need to find your niche. Emiliano nodded and gave Linda a grateful look. Thank you, he said, and then suddenly added, little sister. Linda didn't know what to say. She would have sooner believed that a volcano would erupt right now and flood the city with hot lava than that Emiliano would call her his sister. Meanwhile, the young man had already packed all his things into a box and picked it up. Well, I have to go, he said somewhat sadly. You. Linda began, but her voice broke. She felt a lump in her throat that prevented her from speaking. The young man patiently waited for the girl to continue. Do you miss Dad? Linda finally managed to say. This question wasn't out of idle curiosity, she was just desperately looking for someone who had gone through the same thing she had and could understand and share her feelings. Emiliano's eyes filled with sadness. A lot. I constantly think about him. And I curse myself for not visiting more often. Linda nodded, feeling her eyes fill with tears. You were luckier. You were with them until the very end, Emiliano whispered. Linda felt her heart was about to break from the flood of emotions. She swayed slightly, and Emiliano managed to support her by the elbow. Have you eaten recently? He asked worriedly. You look pale. I only had breakfast, Linda admitted. Then you need to eat right away. Otherwise, you'll faint from all these emotions, Emiliano said. If you don't mind, I'd like to join you. Linda hesitated. Was he inviting her somewhere? You have every right to refuse, the young man quickly said. Not everyone would want to share a meal with someone who stole their project just yesterday. Saying this, Emiliano smiled sadly. All right, let's go have lunch, Linda decided. Just promise me you won't put salt in my drink. Emiliano laughed. I solemnly swear, he said. The other designers watched in amazement as Emiliano and Linda, who were enemies just a quarter of an hour ago, walked out together. The young man took the girl to his favorite cafe. Its interior was dominated by dark tones, but it was still cozy and pleasant to be there. The light from numerous golden lamps on the walls and ceiling enhanced the feeling of home. I often came here when I missed Dad, Emiliano admitted, placing the box on an empty chair and then pulling another chair out for Linda. Really? The girl asked. She still couldn't believe that Emiliano had feelings. Yes, the young man nodded. I desperately missed home. And even you. What? Linda exclaimed. I would never believe that. You always hated me. Emiliano smiled. That's not true. I liked you. But I was a stubborn teenager. I didn't want Dad to marry anyone. I didn't want to share him with anyone else. It was foolish of me. I was so possessive. Linda was more and more amazed. Emiliano was revealing a completely different side of himself to her. The waiter came, and the young people placed their orders. I can't believe it, Linda admitted when he left. I know, Emiliano nodded. And the icing on the cake was that I stole your project. He smiled sadly again. I don't know what came over me. I always envied you. You're so talented. Linda was pleased to hear the praise, but she was also sad that her gift had made someone doubt their own abilities. If you hadn't stolen my project, I would never have dared to show my portfolio to the boss. So everything turned out for the best. And I'm sure you can do a lot too, she said sincerely. Emiliano ran his hand through his hair and smiled. It was clear that it was important and pleasant for him to hear these words. The waiter brought their order, and the young people eagerly dug into the food. Linda was surprised at how hungry she was. Emiliano was right, the stress had burned off all her calories. Linda smiled at the thought. Everything was delicious, and she felt like she was enjoying every moment. And, much to her surprise, she enjoyed being with Emiliano, as if being near him made her feel at home again. It seemed the guy felt the same way. Linda sensed there were invisible threads between them that were hard to break. Their shared past bound them together and gave them support. Can I text you? Emiliano asked after they had finished eating, adding cautiously, You won't reject me, will you? Linda shook her head. Of course, text me, she said. I'll try to find a job as soon as possible, Emiliano said hopefully. You'll succeed, Linda assured him. With that, they parted ways, and the girl felt a quiet sadness as it happened. She didn't even know why it was so hard to let Emiliano go. Knowing he no longer worked at their company made Linda feel sad. As it turned out, his motionless figure at one of the tables had always calmed her. However, Emiliano texted her the very next day and suggested meeting up. Linda gladly agreed. The young people walked around the city for a long time and then went to the movies. They watched a family comedy, laughing and crying at the same time. After the film, they stepped outside and took a deep breath of the warm night air. It smelled of flowers, and thousands of stars shone in the sky. How beautiful! Linda exclaimed, and Emiliano agreed. He suddenly took her hands and pulled her closer. Linda felt her heart pounding. I feel so good with you, Emiliano confessed. It's like I found a lost home again. Me too, Linda replied softly. They looked into each other's eyes for a long time, and then Emiliano kissed her. To Linda, the kiss seemed to last an eternity. She didn't want it to end. Emiliano walked Linda home and kissed her goodbye again. See you tomorrow, he said. See you tomorrow, echoed the girl. She entered the house, feeling a quiet joy in her heart. Linda was no longer alone in this vast world, for Emiliano was with her. The young man soon found a job at a book publishing company and became an illustrator. And a year later, Emiliano and Linda got married, and the girl moved back into the large mansion that had once been her home. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.